Hello everybody, my name is RickChum, an Immortal Valorant player, and today I'll be teaching you about advanced smokes. Let's get into it. Before we get into defensive smokes, I wanted to get into some theory that I'll be using. So the theory I'll be using here is territory and kind of like space. So when I place a smoke here and I activate it, the theory I'm going behind is basically this area. This left side is the defender territory, and this kind of right side is sort of the attacker territory. And by putting this smoke here, this is sort of the drawing the line between attacker territory and defender territory. And that's sort of the theory I'm going behind here. So if I put two smokes like this, it's kind of drawing a line between, right, attacker territory and defender territory. And that's the theory. So what is a defensive smoke and why do we use it? So the best use for defensive smoke is for when you're getting rushed as a defender, or can be explained by even post-plant situations, and you need to hold down the area you're in. So let's say I'm trying to defend B on my own, I hear Skydog, or I know that they're coming B, I can put the smoke like this, and basically, I'm trying to hold down my area, right? This is my side of the smoke, and I'm trying to hold it down. And so as an attacker, I really don't want to try to push through this smoke, because there's so many angles that I'm exposed to when I push out of the smoke. And so these kinds of smokes are obviously have their advantages when you're being rushed, right? You're being rushed and you really need to hold it down. It's flexible in the way that you're able to move around between default and backside, and these like two kind of key areas. But the disadvantages is that if they are lurking and you try to put this smoke down, this can inhibit your ability to sort of jump spot and check B main, right? If you put this smoke up, it's kind of hard to see if anyone's B main. They can maybe kind of just push onto site without your team knowing, and that can be pretty problematic and result in you losing some bodies. And so a similar concept can be applied to post-plant situations. So for an example, I'm going to plant the bomb, and it's like, okay, now I need to defend the spike, I need to hold down my area, right? So you can put maybe a smoke like this, or maybe a smoke like this. And this kind of draws a line between, again, my territory, their territory. Right? It's drawing that line. And it just makes it easier to hold down the area using these kinds of smokes. So what is a default smoke and why do we use it? So a default smoke is a smoke that blocks off the first few angles that you encounter, and it gives your team some space to work with. And it also can kind of mind game the enemies to have them, maybe think that you're there. So on split A, for example, you have this angle on rafters, flower, screens, elbow, and sight. If you want to cross ramp, you have to kind of like check all these angles. But if you just smoke it off like this, kind of crossing a ramp without them knowing. Maybe take some tools here, and from there you can either smoke deeper or kind of work with the space you got. Maybe get a kill or have your team rotate over because you're in a good spot. It's an example. So what is a one-way smoke and why do we use it? So a one-way smoke is a smoke that's placed above the ground floor, and so that there's a gap between the floor and the smoke itself, and through that you can make a one-way. So in this example, I'm holding B heaven with a smoke on male. I have a one-way smoke on male, and I can see into mid just fine if I hold crouch. And as you can see from the attacker's perspective, they actually can't see into B male at all. Even if I go all the way back and crouch, I won't be able to see them. And so in this example, the defenders have the advantage on the one-way. So how does the one-way smoke actually work? So if I go and place this smoke above elevation here, above the ground floor, and activate it, there are two main factors to whether the one-way is working with me or against me. And the first is distance between you and the smoke and the player. And the second is elevation between you and the player. So on flat ground, the person who is further away from the one-way smoke has the advantage, and a person who is also crouched will have the advantage. And depending on the elevation, you might also be at a disadvantage or advantage. For example, the one-way on male, even though I'm higher up, which could mean it's at a disadvantage, it still works because of how far I am relative to the smoke. Here's a quick example of how one-ways work depending on elevation.
Shadows traveling.
So if I throw this smoke, if I'm on even ground with my enemy, as you can see, the one-way actually doesn't work. If I'm on higher elevation compared to my enemy, I can see up to here. But if I stand at where the opponent is, I actually cannot see where I would be standing when I'm using the one-way. So what is a lurk smoke and why do we use them? So a lurk smoke is a quote-unquote improper smoke that you place intentionally to try to get a lurk off, either for you or for your teammates. So in this example, let's say I'm playing A split here, and I want to lurk on A. So I'm going to place the smoke here as a default to obviously block off the first two angles, but I'm going to pair it with a lurk smoke on top of ramp. Not only does it obscure the vision of the ramp player, I am able to kind of walk up ramp and be able to take and isolate these angles on ramp and maybe even secure a kill. But let's say I already have ramp control, already had it, I could place a lurk smoke like this. Right? And I'm able to sort of sneak into vents without them knowing. And maybe again, get a kill for my team. Lurk smokes are probably best used against really defensive players that kind of just sit back and you really need to find a kill on them. Lurk smokes don't only apply to attackers. The concept of lurk smokes also applies to defenders. So let's say the attackers were attacking my site on A side here, and the smoke screen's in heaven, pretty standard. I could put a smoke in front of this, put the smoke here, and I'm able to lurk, get into elbow without them knowing and seeing me. Or I could possibly take a duel on A main players, or maybe even site players. What are link smokes and why do you use them? So just the name I came up with. Essentially the concept is you put two smokes in a line, get to where you need to. So on a set you would normally do something like this, right? Smoke CT and market. But alternatively, you could just smoke like this. And you can get to lane. So there's one on fracture and it looks something like this. And if you're brimstone, you can even throw a third smoke like that. Maybe not the most practical way to use smokes, but one use for it. That concludes the Advanced Smokes Guide. If you still have any more questions, please feel free to leave them down below. You can follow me on TikTok and Twitch at RickChum. And follow and hit that like button. Thank you and see y'all next time.